What happens when decades of generosity are met with callous disregard? That moment when the weight of ingratitude finally becomes unbearable? I never imagined my breaking point would come during Christmas dinner, with holiday music playing softly in the background and my grandchildren just rooms away. But sometimes life's most important lessons arrive when we least expect them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I used to believe that giving was its own reward. That's what they tell you, isn't it? The joy is in the giving. Well, after 62 years on this earth, I've learned that's only part of the story. I'm Eleanor Jenkins, though most people call me Ellie. For 35 years, I shaped young minds as an elementary school teacher in Portland, Oregon. I loved every minute of it. Every anxious child who finally grasped long division, every shy reader who found their voice, those were my rewards. Then my husband James died 8 years ago. Heart attack, sudden and devastating. We'd been planning our retirement, dreaming of the cross-country road trip we'd never taken. There 1 minute, gone the next. The universe doesn't care about your calendar. What James did leave behind was financial security. He'd always been careful with money, had good insurance through his engineering job, and made sound investments. Not wealthy by Portland's West Hill standards, but comfortable enough that I didn't have to worry. At least, that was the plan. My daughter Natalie was always driven. Even as a child, she had a list of goals longer than her arm. College, career, marriage, home, children. She pursued them with military precision. She married Rick Thompson, a financial advisor with ambition that matched hers. Their wedding was the social event of the season. They bought a house in Dunthorpe, Portland's most exclusive neighborhood, and had 2 beautiful children, Zoe, now 17 and applying to colleges, and Tyler, 14 and already talking about business school. I was proud of the life they'd built. I really was. But somewhere along the way, our relationship shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No single moment I could point to. Just a slow drift from mother-daughter to something more transactional. It started small. Natalie asking if I could help with a down payment for their first house. "Just a loan, Mom. We'll pay you back when Rick's commission comes through." The commission came, but the repayment never did. Then it was private school tuition for the kids. "It's an investment in their future, Mom. You always said education matters most." How could I argue with my own words? Then came the renovation of their kitchen, the family vacation to Europe, Zoe's tennis lessons, and Tyler's coding camp. Each request came with heartfelt gratitude and promises of when things settle down. But things never settled down, and I never said no. Why would I? I had the money, and they were family. I loved seeing my grandchildren thrive. I loved the warm smiles when I said yes, the tight hugs from Natalie, the way Rick would clasp my shoulder and say, "You're a lifesaver, Ellie." It felt good to be needed. What I didn't realize was how my identity was slowly being erased. I was no longer Ellie Jenkins, the woman who'd guided hundreds of students, who'd maintained a 30-year marriage, who'd nursed her husband through his final days. I was simply Natalie's mom, or the grandma, a walking checkbook with a pulse. My friend Diane noticed it before I did. We were having coffee at our favorite spot near my old school, watching students file in with their oversized backpacks. "So what did you say when Natalie asked for the money for Zoe's car?" she asked, stirring her latte. "What could I say? 16 is a big milestone, and Natalie wants her to have something safe." Diane's eyebrows shot up. "Safe doesn't have to. Mean brand new. My first car was 10 years old." "Times are different now," I said defensively. "Yes, they are," Diane agreed. "But you know what hasn't changed? Children learning the value of money, of working for things." I changed the subject, but her words stayed with me. Were my grandchildren learning the wrong lessons from my generosity? Was I enabling something unhealthy? I pushed these thoughts away. After all, what else did I have to spend my money on? My modest craftsman home was paid for. I didn't travel much. My needs were simple. If my savings could give my family opportunities, wasn't that worthwhile? But there was something about the way Natalie and Rick had begun to treat me. Not with contempt exactly, but with a sort of benign neglect. I was invited to Sunday dinners, but my opinions were rarely sought. I was welcome at school performances, but seated at the end of the row where I wouldn't appear in the main photos. I existed in the periphery of their lives, essential for what I provided, invisible for who I was. When I suggested a family trip to the Oregon coast last summer, my treat, of course, Natalie explained they were too busy. A week later, I saw on social media they'd gone to Cannon Beach with Rick's parents. No invitation, no mention. "They probably thought you wouldn't enjoy it," said Diane when I confided in her. "Why wouldn't I enjoy the place James and I spent our honeymoon? The place I took Natalie every summer until she was 16. Diane reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Oh, Ellie, they don't see you anymore. They just see what you can give them." I withdrew my hand. "That's not fair. They're busy. They have demanding careers, active kids. And you're making it too easy for them to take advantage of that excuse." I left our coffee date early that day. I was angry, not at Diane, but at myself for feeling the sting of truth in her words. Was I really just a convenience to my own daughter? Had I somehow trained her to see me this way? That night, I pulled out old photo albums. There was Natalie on her 10th birthday, beaming as James and I surprised her with the art set she'd been coveting. There we were at her college graduation, her arms thrown around my neck in genuine joy. When had things changed? When had her eyes stopped lighting up at the sight of me and started calculating what I might provide? I didn't have answers, but I began paying more attention. I noticed how conversations steered toward the kids' needs or their house renovations whenever I visited. How questions about my life were perfunctory at best. "How are you, Mom? Good? Great. So Tyler has this science competition coming up?" I started saying no to small things. When Rick mentioned a weekend golf retreat with clients and hinted that my babysitting would be appreciated, I said I had plans with Diane. The flash of irritation in his eyes was brief, but unmistakable. When Natalie called about contributing to their backyard pool fund, I suggested they might want to wait until they'd finished paying for the kitchen renovation. "But Mom," she'd said, the familiar wheedling tone in her voice, "the kids have been begging for a pool for years, and summer's almost here." "I'm sure they'll survive another summer using the community pool like other children," I replied. There was a stunned silence on the other end, then a cool, "Well, I guess we'll figure something out." They did figure something out. They built the pool anyway and took a home equity loan to do it. When I visited later that summer, Rick proudly showed me around, explaining how they'd made the numbers work. "Smart financial planning," he said with a wink. "Leveraging assets for lifestyle enhancement." I smiled tightly, wondering if he considered me one of those assets to be leveraged. As Zoe's senior year began, conversations increasingly centered around college. She was a bright girl with good grades and a talent for debate. She had her heart set on Brown University, her mother's alma mater. Natalie spoke of it as a foregone conclusion. "Of course, tuition has gotten ridiculous since my day," she said casually over brunch one Sunday. "But Zoe's legacy status will help with admission at least." I nodded, sipping my tea. "Has she looked at scholarships?" Natalie waved a dismissive hand. "She's applying for a few, but you know how competitive those are. Besides, we've always planned for you to handle tuition. You promised, remember? When she was born? Had I? Perhaps in the haze of grandparent euphoria, I'd made some comment about wanting to ensure my grandchildren's education. But a vague sentiment had apparently morphed into a contractual obligation in Natalie's mind. "I'm happy to contribute," I said carefully. "But college is expensive, Natalie. even with my savings. Mom, please, I know exactly what Dad left you. And it's not like you spend money on anything. Your house is paid for. You drive the same car you've had for 10 years. Where else would the money go? Where else indeed? Perhaps to fulfill some of those dreams James and I had put off. Perhaps to security in my later years. Perhaps simply because it was mine to decide. But I said none of this. I just nodded and changed the subject. I was still conflict-averse, still the accommodating mother who wanted her child's approval. But something was shifting inside me. A quiet rebellion was forming, though I didn't yet know what shape it would take. The invitation to Christmas dinner came with strings attached, as usual. Mom, can you bring your sweet potato casserole? Oh, and those sugar cookies the kids love, and maybe come early to help me set up? Natalie's voice was cheerful, expectant. I agreed, of course. What else would I do on Christmas? Sit alone in my house with memories? Besides, despite everything, I loved my family. I loved seeing Tyler's face light up when he opened presents. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I loved the way Zoe still gave me genuine hugs, not the perfunctory gestures of many teenagers. I spent days preparing. The casserole made from my grandmother's recipe. Cookies meticulously decorated with royal icing. Thoughtful gifts chosen. For each family member. A vintage compass for Rick, who collected nautical items. Art supplies for Zoe. Tech gadgets for Tyler. And a spa package for Natalie. I even brought extra presents. Small things for unexpected guests. Natalie and Rick's. Home was a showpiece, especially at Christmas. Professional decorators had transformed it into a winter wonderland of white and silver. No homemade ornaments marred the perfectly coordinated tree. No mismatched stockings hung from the marble fireplace. It was beautiful, but sterile, like a department store display. The first hours were pleasant enough. We exchanged gifts. They seemed to appreciate mine, though Rick did mention that he had a better compass in his study. I helped Natalie in the kitchen while Rick watched football with Tyler. Zoe was glued to her phone, occasionally showing her mother college acceptance letters from friends. Brown's early decision letters come out next month, she said anxiously. Do you think I'll get in? Of course you will, honey, Natalie assured her. You're a legacy. You have perfect grades, and Grandma's donation to the Alumni Fund won't hurt either. I nearly dropped the serving spoon I was holding. What donation? Natalie's eyes widened slightly. Oh, we were going to talk to you about that. It's just a small contribution to show your support for Zoe's application. $10,000. It makes a huge difference for legacy applicants. $10,000. A small contribution I hadn't been consulted about. We'll discuss it later, I said quietly, aware of Zoe's presence. Dinner itself was perfect, as everything in Natalie's life had to be. The table gleamed with china and crystal. The turkey was organic, free-range, and expertly carved by Rick. Wine flowed freely, perhaps too freely. It was during dessert that everything changed. Rick, on his third glass of Cabernet, was holding forth about the economy, his specialty. The problem with most people, he pronounced, swirling his wine, is they don't understand long-term investing. They waste money on immediate pleasures rather than building wealth. Not everyone has extra money to invest, I pointed out mildly. Rick's smile was condescending. Everyone has choices, Ellie. It's about priorities. Rick manages our investments brilliantly, Natalie added. He's building quite a portfolio for our retirement. Speaking of, Rick continued, we should talk about your portfolio, Ellie. I've been meaning to go through it with you. Make sure you're maximizing returns. I took a small bite of pie. My financial advisor seems to be doing fine. Rick's face darkened slightly. That guy at the credit union? Please. You could be doing so much better. In fact, If you'd let me manage your accounts years ago, we'd have had Zoe's college fund fully secured by now. You mean my accounts? The words slipped out before I could stop them. What? Rick's glass paused halfway to his lips. You said, we'd have had Zoe's college fund secured, but it's my money we're talking about. My accounts. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Tyler looked up from his phone, sensing tension. Zoe shifted in her seat. Mom? Natalie said with a forced laugh. Rick just means he could have helped grow your money. For all our benefit. For your benefit, you mean? Again, the words came unbidden. Rick set down his glass with deliberate care. Look, Ellie, let's be honest here. You're living on a teacher's pension. James left you well off. But that money needs proper management, especially since you're getting older and healthcare costs will start eating into your savings. Rick, Natalie hissed, but he waved her off. No, it needs to be said. We've been dancing around this for years. Your mother is becoming a financial burden, Natalie. She's sitting on a nest egg that could be working harder for this family, but instead, she's doling it out piecemeal like she's doing us some huge favor. The room seemed to tilt slightly. A financial burden. After everything I'd given. After. Every check written, every need met, every sacrifice made. A burden. Tyler, Zoe, please go to the living room, Natalie said tightly. The children fled, relief evident on their faces. I sat very still, my hands folded in my lap, my grandmother's wedding ring catching the light from the chandelier. Rick, apologize? Right now, Natalie demanded. You've had too much to drink. But Rick was on a roll now. Why should I apologize for stating facts? Your mother has been holding her financial support over our heads for years, judging our choices while reluctantly funding them. I've never been reluctant, I said quietly. I've given you everything you've asked for. Exactly, Rick's voice rose. You've given it, like charity, like we should be grateful for every penny. Do you know how that feels? To have your mother-in-law looking down her nose at the vacation you take or the car you drive, all while writing checks with strings attached? I was stunned. Was that how they saw my generosity? As judgment? As control? There have never been strings, I said. Not once. Oh, please, Rick scoffed. The little comments, the raised eyebrows. The way you just have to mention how you and James lived so frugally. It's passive-aggressive manipulation, and I'm tired of it. Natalie was wide-eyed, looking between us as if watching a tennis match. Rick, stop it. Mom, he doesn't mean… Yes, I do mean it, Rick interrupted. I mean every word. I've worked my ass off to give this family everything, and I'm still made to feel like I'm not measuring up because I don't have a mother-in-law's approval. Well, guess what? I don't need your approval, Ellie. And pretty soon, I won't need your money either. Once my new investment strategy pays off, you can keep your judgmental charity. I looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. This angry man with his expensive watch and his trophy home and his desperate need to prove himself. And beside him, my daughter, who had once snuggled in my lap reading stories but now sat silent while her husband berated her mother on Christmas Day. Something broke in me then. Or perhaps it finally mended, the part of me that had been bending and accommodating and making excuses for too long. I smiled. It wasn't the reaction either of them expected. Rick faltered mid-tirade. Natalie's brow furrowed. You're absolutely right, Rick, I said calmly, placing my napkin beside my plate. I've been a burden, making you accept my money all these years, helping with down payments and tuition and vacations. How terribly inconsiderate of me. Mom, Natalie began, but I held up a hand. No, I see it clearly now, and I think it's time I stopped being such a burden on this family. I rose from my chair. Thank you for Christmas dinner. It was lovely. Please tell the children I said goodbye. Where are you going? Natalie asked, panic edging into her voice. Home, I said simply. And then I think, somewhere else. Somewhere I've always wanted to see. Rick's face had shifted from righteous anger to confusion. He was a smart man in many ways, but he had miscalculated badly tonight. He had assumed my love for my family would outweigh any insult, any injury. He had assumed wrong. As I gathered my coat and purse, Natalie followed me to the door. "Mom, please. He's drunk. He didn't mean it. Come back inside." I turned to her, this beautiful woman I had raised, now a stranger in so many ways. He meant every word, Natalie. And the worst part is, I think you agree with him. You've just been better at hiding it. Her face crumpled. That's not true. I love you. I know you do, in your way. But you don't respect me. You don't see me. And I've allowed that for far too long. I left then, walking to my car through the light snow that had begun to fall. Behind me, I could hear Natalie calling my name, but I didn't turn back. For the first time in years, I was moving forward, not looking over my shoulder to see if I was needed. As I drove home through the quiet streets of Portland, decorated houses glowing in the darkness, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, hard decisions. But tonight, I had finally stood up for myself. The burden had been lifted, but not in the way Rick imagined. I was no longer carrying the weight of their expectations, their entitlement, their casual disregard. I was free, and I knew exactly what my first act of freedom would be. The house was dark when I arrived home. I hadn't left any lights on, expecting to return well after midnight with leftovers and warm memories. Instead, it was barely 8 o'clock, and I was empty-handed except for the weight of Rick's words still ringing in my ears. A financial burden. I didn't turn on the lights immediately. Instead, I sat in my car for several minutes, watching the snow collect on the windshield, my breath creating small clouds in the cold air. My phone buzzed repeatedly, Natalie calling, then texting. I turned it off. When I finally went inside, the familiar comfort of my home wrapped around me. This modest craftsman had been my refuge for over 30 years. James and I had painted every wall, replaced every fixture, planted every shrub in the garden. We'd raised Natalie here, marked her height on the kitchen door frame, celebrated birthdays and graduations within these walls. The house held our history in every creaking floorboard. I moved through the rooms, turning on lamps, touching familiar objects. James's favorite reading chair, the quilt my mother had made, the collection of sea glass we'd gathered on our honeymoon. Everything in this house had meaning. Nothing was for show. In my study, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a folder labeled Family Finances. Inside were meticulous records of every dollar I'd given to Natalie and Rick over the years. I hadn't kept these records to hold over their heads. I'd simply been organized, a habit from decades of living on a teacher's salary. Now, as I spread the papers across my desk, the numbers told a stark story. Down payment for their first house, $50,000 private school tuition for both children, $24,000 per year for 8 years, family vacation to Europe, $15,000 kitchen renovation, $35,000 swimming pool, $45,000 annual gifts for various expenses, approximately $20,000 per year for 7 years. The total made me sit back in my chair, hand over my mouth. Over $500,000, more than half of what James had left me. And that didn't include the college funds I'd set up for both grandchildren, $150,000 for each, meticulously saved and invested over the years. I'd never tallied it all before, never needed to. Family helps family. That had been my philosophy. But looking at these numbers, I couldn't ignore the imbalance. It wasn't just money flowing one way. It was respect, consideration, gratitude, all the things that should have come back to me but rarely did. My phone buzzed again when I turned it on. 6 missed calls from Natalie, 3 from Rick, multiple texts. "Mom, please call me. Rick is so sorry. Ellie, I was out of line. Come back so we can talk. Mom, you're scaring me. Just let me know you got home safely." I sent a brief reply to Natalie. "I'm home safe. Need time alone. We'll call tomorrow." Then I turned off my phone again and went to the living room. I built a fire in the fireplace, something I rarely did when alone, and poured myself a glass of the good scotch James had loved. I wasn't much of a drinker, but tonight seemed to call for something stronger than tea. As the fire crackled and the snow continued to fall outside, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my anger and hurt. It wasn't just tonight's insult. It was years of small dismissals, of being taken for granted, of being valued for what I could provide rather than who I was. When had I become invisible to my own family? When had my worth become measured in dollars rather than love? The questions swirled as I sipped the scotch, its warmth spreading through me. By the time the fire burned down to embers, I had made 2 decisions. First, I would cancel the college funds. Not out of spite or revenge, but because Rick was right about one thing. I had been using money as a substitute for something else. I'd been buying their love, their time, their inclusion of me in their lives. That had to stop. Second, I would take the trip James and I had always planned. The cross-country journey we'd mapped out but never taken. I would see the desert bloom in New Mexico, walk the beaches of Key West, stand among the red rocks of Sedona. I would live the life I'd put on hold for everyone else. I slept better that night than I had in months. Morning brought a clearer head and a strengthened resolve. I showered, made coffee, and called Martin Chen, my lawyer. Unlike Rick, I didn't view Martin as just a service provider. Over the years, he'd become a friend, one of the few people who still saw me as Ellie, not just as Natalie's mother or the grandchildren's ATM. "Martin, it's Eleanor Jenkins. I'm sorry to bother you during the holidays, but I need to make some changes to my financial arrangements." "Ellie, not a bother at all. What can I help with?" I took a deep breath. "I want to dissolve the college funds I set up for my grandchildren." There was a pause on the other end. "That's significant. May I ask why?" "It's complicated, but essentially, I've decided to use that money differently. I'll still help with their education in some way, but not through these dedicated funds." "I see. Well, we can certainly do that, though there may be some tax implications." "And have you discussed this with Natalie and her husband?" "Not yet. That's my next call." Martin's voice softened. "Ellie, forgive me for overstepping, but this seems like a big decision. Are you sure about this?" I appreciated his concern. Martin had seen too many clients make impulsive financial decisions during emotional times. "I'm sure, Martin. This isn't a spur-of-the-moment choice. It's been coming for a long time." "All right then. I'll prepare the paperwork. The funds should be liquidated and transferred to your personal account within a week. What would you like to do with the money afterward?" "Some of it will go into a more flexible education fund that I control directly. The rest," I smiled to myself, "the rest is for a long overdue adventure." We wrapped up the call with Martin promising to email the necessary documents later that day. As I hung up, my doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see Natalie, standing on my porch, bundled in her designer coat, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I considered not answering. I wasn't ready for this conversation. But hiding wouldn't solve anything. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "Mom!" Natalie's relief was palpable. "I've been so worried. Why didn't you answer my calls?" "I told you I needed time alone," I said, keeping my voice even. "Come in before you freeze." She followed me into the living room, unwinding her scarf, but not removing her coat, as if unsure how long she'd be staying. I noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. "Can I get you some coffee?" I asked, defaulting to the role of hostess, of caretaker. "No, thank you." She perched on the edge of the sofa. "Mom, about last night." "Before you continue," I interrupted, "I want you to know I've made some decisions this morning. I've called Martin Chen and instructed him to dissolve the college funds for Zoe and Tyler." Natalie's face went slack with shock. "You? What? You can't do that." "I can, and I have. The money will be moved to my personal account, and I'll decide how and if it's used for their education." "But that's their future. We've been counting on that money. Zoe's already applied to schools based on having that funding." "She can still go to whatever school accepts her, but you and Rick will have to figure out how to pay for it. Or she can apply for scholarships and student loans like millions of other bright young people." Natalie stood up, her face flushed. "This is because of what Rick said, isn't it? He was drunk, Mom. He didn't mean it." "He meant every word," I said calmly. "And so do I. I'm done being the family bank. I'm done being invisible until you need something." "That's not fair. We've never—" "When was the last time you called me just to talk, Natalie? Not to ask for money or childcare or help with an event? When was the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my needs?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. "I've decided to take a trip," I continued. "The cross-country journey your father and I always planned. I leave next week." "Next week? For how long?" "I don't know. A few months, perhaps. Maybe longer." Natalie sank back onto the sofa, her expression a mix of confusion and anger. "So you're just running away, abandoning your family because of one stupid comment?" "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm choosing to live my life on my terms for the first time in years. There's a difference." "What about the children? They'll be devastated when they find out you've canceled their college funds." I felt a pang of guilt at that. I loved my grandchildren, deeply. "The money isn't gone, Natalie. It's just no longer in an untouchable account with their names on it. I'll still help with their education, but on my terms. And perhaps it's a good opportunity for them to learn that nothing in life is guaranteed, especially money from others." "I can't believe this." She shook her head. "After everything we've been through as a family, after how close we've always been." "Have we been close?" I wanted to ask. "Or have we just been financially entangled?" "This isn't just about the money," I said instead. "It's about respect, about being seen as a person, not a resource. Rick made it very clear how he sees me, and I suspect his view isn't far from yours." "That's absurd. I love you, Mom." "I know you do, in your way. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. Not for me." We talked in circles for another half hour, Natalie cycling through shock, anger, bargaining, and finally a teary appeal to family loyalty. I remained calm throughout, my resolve strengthening rather than weakening with each of her arguments. It was as if a lifetime of accommodating others had suddenly crystallized into a perfect clarity about my own worth, my own needs. When Natalie finally left, promising that this isn't over, I sat in the quiet of my living room and felt an unexpected lightness. The confrontation had been difficult, but necessary. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, I had prioritized my needs over hers. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Over the next few days, the repercussions of my decisions rippled through the family. Rick called, his voice tight with controlled anger, to discuss alternatives to dissolving the college funds. I listened politely, then reiterated my decision. "This is incredibly selfish, Ellie," he said finally, dropping the veneer of reasonableness. "Do you have any idea what this does to our financial planning, to the kids' futures? I'm sure a brilliant financial mind like yours will figure something out," I replied, surprised by my own coolness. "After all, I'm just a burden with poor investment strategies, aren't I?" He hung up without responding. Zoe texted next, her message a study in teenage manipulation. Grandma, is it true you don't want me to go to college? Dad says you canceled my college fund because you're mad at him. That's not fair to me. I took time crafting my response, wanting to be honest without burdening her with adult concerns. Zoe, I love you very much, and I absolutely want you to go to college. The money for your education still exists, but the arrangement has changed. This is between your parents and me. Please focus on your applications and doing your best. We'll figure out the financial details when the time comes. Love, Grandma. She didn't reply, which wasn't surprising. She was caught between her parents' anger and her grandmother's unexpected rebellion. It wasn't a comfortable place for a 17-year-old. Tyler, always more sensitive than his sister, left a voicemail that brought tears to my eyes. Hi, Grandma, it's Tyler. I don't really understand what's going on, but Mom and Dad are super upset, and Zoe's crying about college. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You seemed sad at Christmas. Maybe we could play chess sometime. I miss you. I called him back immediately, and we arranged for him to visit the following day while his parents were at work. When Tyler arrived, bundled against the January chill, he gave me a genuine hug, the kind that reminded me why family, despite its complications, was still worth fighting for. We played chess at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd taught him the game when he was 7. He'd grown so much since then, already showing signs of the man he would become. Unlike his sister, who took after her father in ambition and drive, Tyler had inherited his grandfather's quieter nature, his thoughtfulness. Dad says you're going on a trip, he said as he contemplated his next move. That's right. A road trip across the country, like Grandpa and I always wanted to do. Sounds cool. Will you send me pictures? Every day, I promised. And maybe you can join me for part of it during your summer break. His face lit up. Really? That would be awesome. As long as... He trailed off, his enthusiasm dimming. As long as your parents agree, I finished for him. We'll see how things are between us by then. He nodded, understanding more than I'd given him credit for. They're really mad about the college money, Dad especially. I know. And I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of adult problems. It's okay. I get it, sort of. They can be... He searched for the right word. A lot. I smiled at his diplomatic phrasing. Yes, they can be a lot. But I still love them. And you. That won't ever change. Even if you're not paying for stuff anymore. The question was so direct, so innocent in its clarity that I laughed. Yes, even then. Real love doesn't come with price tags, Tyler. That's something I hope you'll always remember. He nodded solemnly. I will. After he left, I stood at the window watching him bike down the street, his lanky frame hunched against the cold. Something about our conversation had strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about teaching the next generation a different way of relating, one based on genuine connection rather than transaction. The next few days were a flurry of activity. I met with Martin to finalize the financial changes, booked the first leg of my journey, and began packing for an extended time away. I found a reliable house sitter through my old teaching colleague, arranged for my mail to be forwarded, and said temporary goodbyes to neighbors who had known me since James was alive. Natalie made one more attempt at changing my mind, arriving, unannounced with what she clearly thought was a compelling argument. Mom, we've talked it over, and we understand you're upset. We're willing to compromise. If you reconsider the college funds, Rick and I will make sure you're more included in family decisions. We'll have dinner together every Sunday, and we'll consult you about important financial choices. I looked at my beautiful daughter, wondering when she had become so transactional, when our relationship had become a series of negotiations rather than a bond of love. Natalie, I said gently, you're still missing the point. I don't want to be included in your lives as a concession. I want to be valued for who I am, not what I can provide. And right now, I need to rediscover who I am outside of being your mother and the children's grandmother. So you're still going? Her voice was small, almost childlike. Yes, I leave tomorrow. And the college funds? My decision stands, but as I've said repeatedly, that doesn't mean I won't help with their education. It just means it will be on different terms. She left with a stiff hug and a request to, at least stay in touch. I promised I would, though I suspected my definition of in touch might differ from hers. That night, I sat in my garden despite the cold, wrapped in James's old cardigan and clutching a mug of hot tea. The winter stars were brilliant above. Me, the city lights dimmed by clouds. In the morning, I would begin a journey I'd dreamed of for decades. I should have been excited, perhaps even nervous. Instead, I felt a profound calm, the kind that comes with knowing you're finally being true to yourself after years of compromise. I wish you were coming with me, James, I whispered to the stars. But I think you'd be proud of me for finally doing this, for finally standing up for myself. A soft breeze rustled the dormant garden, and I chose to take it as his answer, as his blessing. Morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of crystalline winter day that feels like a fresh page waiting to be written upon. I loaded my car with a single suitcase, a box of supplies, and a carefully planned route that would take me first to Santa Fe, New Mexico. The desert in winter had always intrigued me. Stark beauty, clear light, ancient cultures rich with wisdom. As I locked my front door, I noticed a car pulling up to the curb, Rick's silver Mercedes. My heart sank. I didn't want another confrontation, not when I was finally on my way. But it wasn't Rick who emerged from the car. It was Tyler, clutching a small package wrapped in newspaper comics, his signature gift wrap since he was little. I heard you were leaving today, he said, shuffling up the path. I wanted to say goodbye and give you this. I unwrapped the package to find a small wooden box, handcrafted with obvious care. When I opened it, a tiny chess piece, a queen, was nestled inside on a bed of soft cloth. I made it in shop class, Tyler explained, his cheeks pink with cold and pride. It's supposed to be the most powerful piece, right? That's what you told me when you taught me to play. I thought maybe it could remind you of home sometimes. Tears pricked my eyes. It's perfect, Tyler. Thank you. I hugged him tightly, feeling his gangly teenage frame against mine. I'll keep it with me always. You'll really send pictures and call sometimes? I promise. And remember what we talked about coming to visit this summer. He nodded, his face brightening. I already started researching cool places along your route. There's this amazing astronomy center in Arizona I really want to see. Then we'll make it happen. I glanced at the car, where Rick sat staring straight ahead, deliberately not looking our way. You should go. Your dad's waiting. Tyler followed, my gaze inside. Yeah, he doesn't know I'm giving you this. He just thinks I forgot something at a friend's house near here. He hesitated, then added, I'm sorry about everything, Grandma. About what Dad said at Christmas. About how they've been treating you. Oh, Tyler, I touched his cheek. None of this is your fault. None of it is your burden to carry. I love you, and that won't change no matter what happens between me and your parents. He nodded, blinking rapidly. Love you too, Grandma. Drive safe, okay? With one more quick hug, he jogged back to his father's waiting car. I noticed Rick's stiff posture, the way he didn't acknowledge me even as they drove away. The hurt was still there, but it was muted now, overshadowed by the genuine connection I'd just shared with my grandson. I placed the wooden queen carefully, in my coat pocket, where I could touch it easily as I drove. Then I got into my car, adjusted my mirrors, and pulled away from the curb, heading east toward the rising sun. For the first time in decades, I wasn't looking back. I wasn't wondering if I was needed, if I should stay, if I was doing the right thing for everyone else. I was simply going forward, eyes on the horizon, heart open to whatever came next. The burden had been lifted, but not in the way Rick had imagined when he uttered those hurtful words at Christmas dinner. I was no longer carrying the weight of their expectations, their entitlement, their casual disregard. I was free. And the road ahead was calling my name. Interstate highways have a rhythm to them. The soft thrum of tires against pavement, the gentle rocking as you pass semi-trucks, the hypnotic flash of mile markers counting down the distance to the next destination. I'd forgotten how meditative driving could be. Just you, the car, and the endless ribbon of road stretching before you. I'd chosen to take the southern route from Portland, down through Northern California, across Nevada and Arizona, and finally into New Mexico. It would have been faster to fly, of course, but this journey wasn't about speed. It was about reclaiming the time I'd set aside for so long, about experiencing every mile between who I'd been and who I was becoming. The first day was the hardest. Every mile took me farther from my familiar life, from the roles I'd played for decades: mother, grandmother, benefactor. As the Oregon landscape gave way to California's vastness, doubts crept in. Was I being selfish? Impulsive? What if Natalie was right? Was I just running away? But then I'd remember Rick's face at Christmas dinner, the contempt in his voice when he called me a burden. I'd recall how Natalie had sat silent, neither defending me nor truly understanding why his words cut so deeply. I'd think about the $500,000 I'd poured into their lives with little acknowledgement, and my resolve would strengthen. I spent the first night in a small hotel near Lake Tahoe. After checking in, I found a local restaurant and treated myself to dinner. Sitting alone in a public place had once felt awkward, even embarrassing. Now it felt like a tiny rebellion, a declaration that I was enough, just me, just Eleanor Jenkins enjoying a good meal and a glass of wine. The server, a woman about Natalie's age, smiled warmly as she brought my food. "Traveling through?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "On my way to Santa Fe." "Beautiful this time of year. Family there?" It was an innocent question, the kind strangers exchange over dinner, but it made me pause. "No," I said finally. "Just me, taking a trip I've been planning for a long time." She nodded approvingly. "Good for you. Solo travel is underrated, especially for women our age. Everyone expects us to be taking care of someone else." Her words stayed with me as I ate. Everyone expects us to be taking care of someone else. Wasn't that the truth? When had it become selfish to take care of myself instead? Back in my hotel room, I checked my phone for the first time that day. 3 missed calls from Natalie, 2 from Rick, surprisingly. A text from Zoe that simply read, "Hope you're okay, Grandma. Call when you can." And a voicemail from Tyler. "Hi, Grandma. Just checking that you're safe on the road. Dad's still mad, but Mom seems more sad than angry now. I don't know if that's better. Anyway, I started that research about places to visit. Call me when you can?" I texted Tyler back. "Made it to Lake Tahoe. All is well. We'll call tomorrow. Love you." To Zoe, I sent, "I'm fine, sweetheart. On the road to Santa Fe, we'll call soon." I didn't respond to Natalie or Rick. Not yet. I needed more distance, not just physical miles, but emotional space to process what I was doing and why. After a solid night's sleep, I continued eastward through Nevada. The landscape became increasingly spare, the mountains giving way to high desert. There was a stark beauty to it that resonated with me, a reminder that there's value in stripping, away excess, in standing alone against the elements. By the 3rd day, as I crossed into Arizona, the raw emotions of my departure had begun to settle. In their place came a growing sense of anticipation. I was actually doing this. The journey James and I had planned for decades, the one that had always been pushed aside for more important priorities, was finally happening. I stopped at the Grand Canyon, a detour I hadn't originally planned. Standing at the south rim, as the late afternoon sun painted the ancient rock formations in shades of amber and gold, I felt both insignificant and powerful. My problems, the family drama, the hurt feelings, even the justified anger, seemed small against the backdrop of this timeless landscape. Yet I had made choices that altered the course of my life, just as surely as the Colorado River had carved this magnificent canyon over millions of years. Small actions accumulated over time, creating profound change. That evening, I called Natalie. "Mom!" Her voice was tight with relief and lingering anger. "Finally, where are you?" "At the Grand Canyon," I said. "It's even more beautiful than the pictures. We've been worried sick. You could have at least let us know you were safe." "I texted the children," I said. "And I needed some time to think." "About what? About how you've upended our lives because of one stupid comment?" "Rick has been beside himself trying to figure out how to pay for Zoe's college now." I sighed. She still didn't understand. "This isn't about one comment, Natalie. It's about years of feeling invisible, except when you needed something from me. And as for Zoe's college, I've told you repeatedly I still intend to help. But the terms have changed." "To what? What do you want from us?" The question took me aback. "I don't want anything from you. That's not why I'm doing this." "Then why? What's the point of all this drama?" I gazed out at the canyon, watching, as the deepening shadows created new contours along its vast expanse. "The point is that I'm 62 years old, and I've spent the last decade of my life living for everyone but myself. I've given, and somewhere along the way, that became expected rather than appreciated. I'm not doing this to punish you, Natalie. I'm doing it because I need to remember who I am beyond being your mother and the children's grandmother." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Natalie spoke again, her voice was quieter. "I don't understand this, Mom. I don't understand you anymore." "I know," I said softly. "And that's part of the problem. You haven't tried to understand me for a very long time. That's not fair." "Perhaps not, but it's how I feel." We talked a while longer, going in circles as we had before I left. But there was a subtle shift in Natalie's tone, less entitled anger, more genuine confusion. She truly couldn't comprehend why I'd done what I'd done. In her world, family obligations were clear and unchanging. Mothers sacrificed for children. Grandmothers provided for grandchildren. The idea that I might need something different, something for myself, was foreign to her. When we hung up, I felt drained but oddly peaceful. I hadn't backed down. I hadn't let guilt sway me from my path. Small victories, but meaningful ones. The journey to Santa Fe took me another 2 days, with stops that caught my fancy along the way. I visited a tiny museum dedicated to Native American art, had lunch at a roadside diner where the green chili stew nearly brought tears to my eyes, and pulled over countless times to photograph landscapes that took my breath away. By the time I arrived in Santa Fe, I felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The city welcomed me with its adobe buildings glowing warm in the winter sunshine, its streets filled with art galleries and cafes, its air scented with piñon wood smoke. I'd rented a small casita on the outskirts of town, a one-bedroom guest house, behind a main residence with its own entrance and a tiny courtyard where I could sit and watch the sunset. It was perfect. Cozy without being cramped, private without being isolated. The owner, Grace Sullivan, was a widow in her 70s, with silver hair worn in a long braid and turquoise jewelry adorning her neck and wrists. She greeted me with warm hospitality but respected my privacy, showing me around the casita and then leaving me to settle in with a promise to check in tomorrow to see how you're faring. That first evening in Santa Fe, I sat in the courtyard despite the chill, wrapped in a blanket Grace had provided, watching as the sky turned from blue to pink to deep purple. The stars emerged one by one, brighter than I'd ever seen them in Portland. I felt a serenity I hadn't experienced in years. No demands on my time, no expectations to meet, no need to be anything for anyone. Just me, Eleanor Jenkins, witnessing the beauty of a southwestern sunset. The next morning, Grace knocked on my door with freshly baked banana bread and an invitation to join her for coffee. "If you're not too tired from your journey." I accepted gratefully. After days alone on the road, conversation with someone new, someone who knew nothing of my family drama, was appealing. Grace's kitchen was warm and inviting, filled with colorful pottery and the aroma of strong coffee. We sat at a table by the window, watching birds flit around a feeder in her garden. "So what brings you to Santa Fe in the middle of winter?" she asked, passing me a mug emblazoned with a roadrunner. The question was innocent enough, but it gave me pause. How much did I want to share with this woman I'd just met? Yet something about Grace's direct gaze and no-nonsense demeanor invited honesty. "I'm taking the trip my late husband and I always planned but never took," I said. "And I'm recalibrating my relationship with my family." Grace nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Family is complicated," she said simply. "I have 2 sons who haven't spoken to each other in 15 years. Over what? A boat. A damn fishing boat their father left them." "That's terrible," I said, genuinely horrified. "Have you tried to reconcile them?" She laughed, a rich, throaty sound. For the first 5 years, I did nothing but try. Then I realized something. Their relationship wasn't my responsibility. I could love them both without fixing them. That sounds liberating. It was. Hard, but liberating. She took a sip of her coffee. "So what are you not fixing in your family?" I found myself telling her everything. The years of financial support, the gradual erosion of respect, Rick's Christmas dinner outburst, my decision to reclaim my life and my money. It poured out of me in a torrent of words, as if I'd been holding it in for too long. When I finished, I felt almost embarrassed by how much I'd shared, but Grace was nodding thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "there's an old Navajo proverb, you can't wake a person who is pretending to be asleep. Your son-in-law and daughter were pretending not to see how they were treating you, and no amount of gentle hints was going to wake them up. Sometimes it takes a thunderclap." "Like canceling the college funds," I said with a small smile. "Exactly like that." She refilled our coffee cups. "But I suspect this isn't just about teaching them a lesson. It's about reclaiming yourself." "Yes," I said, surprised by how precisely she'd captured it. "That's exactly it. I've spent so long being defined by what I could give them that I've forgotten who I am apart from that." "Well, Santa Fe is a good place to remember," Grace said. "There's something about the light here. It shows you things as they really are." Over the next few days, I settled into a rhythm in Santa Fe. Mornings were for exploration. The historic plaza with its palace of governors, the myriad art galleries along Canyon Road, the stunning spiral staircase at the Loretto Chapel. Afternoons I often spent reading or writing in my casita's courtyard, soaking in the winter sunshine. Evenings sometimes brought conversations with Grace, whose insights and stories became a welcome companion to my own reflections. I called the grandchildren every few days. Tyler was enthusiastic about my adventures, asking detailed questions about the places I'd seen and the people I'd met. Zoe was more reserved, her responses polite but guarded. I sensed Natalie and Rick's influence there, not explicitly turning her against me perhaps, but certainly framing my actions in a way that emphasized their inconvenience rather than my autonomy. About a week into my stay, I received an unexpected call from Martin Chen. "Ellie, I wanted to update you on the financial situation," he said after our initial greetings. The college funds have been successfully dissolved and the money transferred to your personal account, as requested. Thank you, Martin. Has there been any reaction? I asked, wondering if Rick had tried to intervene legally. Actually, yes. I received a call from Richard Thompson yesterday. He was quite agitated, insisting that you didn't have the legal right to dissolve funds that had been promised to your grandchildren. My heart sank. And what did you tell him? I reminded him that the funds were in your name, with your grandchildren as beneficiaries, and that you retained full legal control over the assets. I also suggested that he consult his own attorney if he wished to pursue the matter further. I see. Do you think he will? Martin's sigh was audible through the phone. Honestly, Ellie, I doubt it. Any lawyer worth their salt would tell him he doesn't have a case. Unless you signed some sort of contract promising this money, which I know you didn't, it remains yours to control. Thank you, Martin. I appreciate your handling this. It's my job, he said warmly. But more importantly, how are you? Are you finding what you needed on this journey of yours? The question touched me. Unlike Rick, who saw Martin solely as a service provider, I'd always valued his wisdom and kindness. I think I am, I said thoughtfully. It's early days yet, but I already feel more myself, if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense, he assured me. Just remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. After we hung up, I sat in the courtyard, considering Martin's words and Rick's attempt to legally coerce me. My son-in-law's actions didn't surprise me, but they did sadden me. Even now, he saw me only as a resource to be managed, an obstacle to overcome, not as a person with my own needs and rights. That evening, Natalie called again. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Did you know Rick called your lawyer? Did you put him up to embarrassing us like that? I didn't put him up to anything, I replied calmly. Martin was simply doing his job, explaining the legal realities of the situation. Legal realities? Mom, we're talking about family here. About promises you made to your own grandchildren. Yes, we are talking about family, I agreed. About how families should treat each other with respect and consideration, not as unlimited resources to be tapped whenever needed. That's not fair. We've always been grateful for your help. Have you? When was the last time that gratitude translated into actual consideration for my feelings, my needs? When was the last time you called me just to talk, not to ask for something? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Natalie, I said, softening my tone. I love you. I love the children. That hasn't changed and won't change. But our relationship needs to change. It can't be based on what I can provide financially. It needs to be based on mutual respect and genuine care. So this is what? Some kind of test? To see if we love you without your money? The hurt in her voice was real and it pained me. But breaking old patterns is never painless. No, it's not a test. It's a boundary. One I should have established long ago. I'm still your mother. I still want to be part of your lives, but on different terms. And those terms include abandoning your grandchildren's college plans, leaving town when we need you most. I took a deep breath. Those terms include me having the autonomy to make my own financial decisions and to pursue dreams I've put off for decades. It includes being seen as a whole person, not just as mom or grandma, or a convenient ATM. I've never thought of you as an ATM, Natalie protested, but there was a note of defensiveness in her voice that suggested otherwise. Perhaps not consciously, I allowed, but actions speak louder than intentions, sweetheart. We talked a while, longer, going over the same ground without truly resolving anything, but I noticed a subtle shift in Natalie's arguments. There was less entitlement in her tone, more genuine bewilderment. She truly didn't understand why I was doing this, but she was beginning to realize that I wasn't going to change my mind. When we hung up, I felt drained but steadier than before. Each conversation where I held my ground, each day that passed without me giving in to guilt or manipulation, strengthened my resolve. That night, I sent Tyler a package containing small treasures I'd found in Santa Fe, a miniature clay storyteller, figure, a book about desert astronomy, and a bag of the local Piñon coffee he'd expressed interest in when I described it. I included a note telling him how much I missed him and detailing some of the places we might visit together in the summer. I sent Zoe a different package, a beautiful silver bracelet from a Native American artisan and a book about women artists of the Southwest. My note to her was more careful, acknowledging the difficult position she was in without apologizing for the choices I'd made. I wanted her to know I still loved her, still supported her dreams, even if the financial arrangements had changed. To Natalie, I sent nothing yet. Our relationship needed time and space to reset, not gifts that might be misinterpreted as peace offerings or, worse, attempts to buy back affection. As my second week in Santa Fe drew to a close, I realized something important. I was happy. Not the fleeting happiness of a vacation, but a deeper contentment that came from honoring my own needs, from remembering who I was beyond the roles I'd played for so long. Grace noticed it too. "You're standing straighter," she commented one evening as we shared a bottle of wine in her living room. "When you arrived, you were all hunched shoulders and apologetic smiles. Now you look like a woman who knows her own mind." "I feel like one," I admitted, "for the first time in years." "Good," she said firmly. "About damn time, I'd say." I laughed, surprised by her bluntness but appreciating it too. "Better late than never?" "Exactly." She raised her glass in a toast. "To late bloomers and second chances." The next morning, I woke to a text from Tyler. "Got your package. The coffee is amazing. Dad saw it and got weird, though. Said I shouldn't accept gifts from you right now because it's manipulative." I told him that was stupid. Am I in trouble? My heart ached at the position he was in, caught between adults who should know better. I replied carefully, "You're not in trouble with me, ever. I sent the gifts because I love you and thought you'd enjoy them. If it makes things easier at home, though, you can keep them private for now." His response came quickly. "No way. I'm not hiding my cool stuff because Dad's being unreasonable. Love you, Grandma." I smiled at his teenage bravado, though I worried about the conflict he was facing at home. Still, I was proud of him for standing his ground, for recognizing unfairness when he saw it. Perhaps something good would come of all this after all. A new generation learning that love shouldn't be conditional, that boundaries are healthy, that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. As I prepared for the next leg of my journey, Key West, with its promise of warm beaches and turquoise waters, I felt both apprehension and excitement. The confrontations weren't over. The hurt feelings wouldn't heal overnight. The new boundaries I'd established would be tested again and again. But for the first time in decades, I was moving through the world on my own terms, making choices based on my own needs rather than everyone else's expectations, standing firm in the face of pressure to return to old patterns. I was reclaiming my life, one day at a time. And that was worth every difficult conversation, every pang of doubt, every moment of guilt. It was worth everything. The Florida sun hit differently than the winter light of Santa Fe. There, the sunshine had been crisp and clear, illuminating every detail of the landscape with startling precision. Here in Key West, it was a golden blanket that draped over everything. Softening edges and warming my skin in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible after the Pacific Northwest winter. I'd chosen Key West as my second destination deliberately. The complete opposite of Santa Fe's desert austerity, lush, tropical, surrounded by water rather than earth, a place where James and I had always planned to go but never made it. "When we retire," we'd say, pushing it off to that mythical someday that never arrived for him. My small rental cottage was just off Duval Street, close enough to walk to the main attractions but tucked away on a quiet lane lined with palm trees and bougainvillea. The first morning I woke to the sound of roosters crowing, apparently a Key West tradition, these feral chickens strutting around like they owned the place. After breakfast on my tiny porch, I set out to explore. The island was small enough to navigate on foot or by bicycle, which suited me perfectly. I wandered through the historic district, admiring the pastel-colored houses with their gingerbread trim and lush gardens. I visited Hemingway's house, smiling at the six-toed cats that lounged on antique furniture as if they were the rightful heirs to the author's legacy. In the afternoon, I found my way to the southernmost point in the continental United States, marked by a striped concrete buoy. Tourists lined up to take photos, but I was content to stand a little apart, gazing out at the endless blue of the ocean, thinking about how far I'd come, not just geographically, but emotionally. 2 months ago, I would never have imagined standing here alone, making my own decisions, answering to no one's expectations but my own. I would have been worrying about Natalie's reaction, about the grandchildren's needs, about whether I was being selfish for wanting this experience for myself. Now, though the guilt still surfaced occasionally, it was tempered by a growing sense of self-worth. I deserved this journey. I deserved to live my life fully, not just as an extension of my family's needs. That evening, I ate dinner at a small restaurant near the harbor, watching the sunset alongside dozens of other tourists. It was a ritual here, gathering at Mallory Square to applaud as the sun slipped below the horizon. Street performers entertaining the crowds, vendors selling everything from key lime pie on a stick to handmade jewelry. As darkness fell and the crowd dispersed, I found myself sitting on a bench, reluctant to return to my cottage just yet. The night was warm, the stars were emerging, and for the first time in my journey, I felt a pang of loneliness. Not for Natalie or the grandchildren, but for James. He would have loved this place, the blend of history and hedonism, the literary connections, the laid-back atmosphere. "Mind if I join you?" a voice asked, interrupting my thoughts. I looked, up to see an older gentleman with weathered skin and kind eyes. He gestured to the empty space beside me. "Please," I said, moving my purse to make room. "First sunset?" he asked, settling onto the bench. "Is it that obvious?" He chuckled. "You have that look, part awe, part, what do I do now that the show's over?" I smiled. "You've got me pegged." "I'm Harold," he said, offering his hand. "Eleanor," I replied, shaking it. "But most people call me Ellie." "Well, Ellie, what brings you to our little island? Escaping the winter up north?" "Something like that," I said. "I'm taking a trip my husband and I always planned but never took. He passed away 8 years ago." Harold's face softened with understanding. "I'm sorry to hear that. My Margaret's been gone 5 years now. Cancer. It's hard," I said simply. He nodded. "Gets easier, but never easy. You traveling alone then?" "Yes, first time actually." "Brave woman." I laughed softly. "Not really. Just making up for lost time, I suppose." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the last colors fade from the sky. Then Harold stood, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a business card. "I run fishing charters," he said, handing it to me. "Nothing fancy, just me and my boat. But if you'd like to see the island from the water, give me a call. Senior's discount." He winked. I took the card, smiling at his gentle sales pitch. "I might just do that. Thank you, Harold." After he left, I walked slowly back to my cottage, thinking about our brief exchange. There was something refreshing about being seen simply as Ellie, a visitor to the island, a potential customer for a fishing charter. Not as someone's mother or grandmother or financial safety net. Just a woman. On her own adventure. 3 days into my Key West stay, I called Harold and booked a half-day fishing charter. I'd never been much of an angler, but the idea of being out on the water appealed to me. Besides, James had loved fishing. This would be my way of including him in the journey. Harold's boat was a well-maintained center console, not large but perfectly adequate for coastal fishing. He greeted me with a warm smile and a thermos of coffee, helping me aboard with a steady hand. "Ever been deep-sea fishing before, Ellie?" he asked as we motored out of the marina. "Never," I admitted. My husband was the fisherman in the family. I mostly just enjoyed the peace and quiet of being on the water. Well, we'll get you some peace and quiet and maybe a fish or two if we're lucky. The morning passed pleasantly. Harold was an excellent guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing island history as we made our way to his favorite fishing spot. He taught me to cast with patience and humor, not making me feel foolish when I tangled the line or missed a bite. By noon, I'd caught 2 small yellowtail snappers that Harold assured me were perfectly respectable for a beginner. As we headed back to the marina, the wind picked up, sending spray over the bow. I laughed, tilting my face to catch the droplets, feeling more alive than I had in years. "You're a natural," Harold commented, watching me with an approving smile. "Some people hate getting wet. They spend the whole trip hunched over trying to stay dry." "Life's too short to worry about a little salt water," I replied, surprising myself with the philosophy. When was the last time I'd embraced a moment like this, without worrying about responsibilities or appearances? Before James died, certainly. Perhaps even before Natalie was grown. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten how to simply enjoy experiences for what they were. As Harold tied up at the dock, he asked, "What are your plans for those fish? Your cottage have a kitchen?" "It does, but I'm not much of a cook when it comes to fish. Tell you what," he said. "My daughter owns a little restaurant not far from here. She'll cook these up for you proper, island style, on the house." "Oh, I couldn't impose—" "No imposition," he insisted. "She loves cooking for new folks. Besides, it's good for business. You tell all your friends back home about the best fish dinner you ever had in Key West." I smiled, touched by his generosity. "Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse?" Harold's daughter's restaurant turned out to be a charming open-air place called the Hungry Pelican, just a few blocks from my cottage. She was a woman in her 40s with her father's kind eyes and an easy laugh. When Harold introduced us and explained about the fish, she immediately ushered me to a table with a view of the garden. "Dad's taken a shine to you," she said as she brought me a glass of white wine. "He doesn't offer to clean and cook just anybody's catch." "He's been very kind," I said. "It's my first time traveling alone, and he's made me feel welcome." "First time?" She raised an eyebrow. "What inspired that?" It was a simple question, asked without judgment, but it opened a floodgate. Before I knew it, I was telling her about Natalie and Rick, about the Christmas dinner disaster, about my decision to reclaim my life and my finances. I hadn't meant to share so much with a stranger, but there was something liberating about talking to someone who had no connection to my life in Portland. When I finished, she shook her head slowly. "Good for you," she said firmly. "Standing up for yourself like that. Too many women our age just take it, you know? The disrespect, the being taken for granted. They think it's their job to give until there's nothing left." "That was me until recently," I admitted. "Well, not anymore." She raised her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings." I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a surge of solidarity. To new beginnings. The fish, when it arrived, was indeed the best I'd ever tasted, lightly fried with a mango salsa that perfectly balanced sweet and spicy. As I ate, I found myself wondering about Harold and his daughter, about the life they'd built here on this small island. Their easy affection for each other, the mutual respect evident in every interaction. It was what I wanted with Natalie, Not the strained politeness of recent years. Not the transaction-based relationship we'd fallen into. But a genuine connection based on love and respect. Was it too late for us? Had too much damage been done? The worry must have shown on my face because Harold's daughter, Kelly, she'd told me to call her, stopped by my table with a concerned look. "Everything okay with the fish?" "It's perfect," I assured her. "I was just thinking about my own daughter, wondering if we'll ever get back to a good place after all this." Kelly nodded thoughtfully. "Family's complicated. Dad and I went through a rough patch after Mom died. I blamed him for not getting her to the doctor sooner, even though that was ridiculous. She'd been hiding her symptoms from all of us." "How? Did you move past it?" "Time. Forgiveness. On both sides. And clear boundaries." She smiled wryly. "Dad had to learn he couldn't fix everything for me. And I had to learn I couldn't control his grieving process. Once we gave each other that space, we found our way back to each other." Her words stayed with me long after I'd finished my meal and returned to my cottage. Clear boundaries. Space to grow. Wasn't that exactly what I was trying to establish with my own family? Not cutting them off, but creating a healthier dynamic where my needs mattered too? That evening, I called Tyler as promised. He answered on the first ring, his voice excited. "Grandma, are you really in Key West? Have you seen any sharks? Is it super hot there?" I laughed, warmed by his enthusiasm. "Yes, I'm really here. No sharks yet, but I did go fishing today and caught 2 snappers. And it's warm but not too hot. Perfect, actually." "That's so cool. I looked it up and Key West is like the southernmost point in the U.S. Have you taken a picture at the big marker thing?" "I have. I'll send it to you." I hesitated, then asked, "How are things at home?" His voice dropped a notch. "Okay, I guess. Mom and Dad are still weird about everything. Zoe's mad at you, but I think she's more mad that she might not get to go to Brown if Dad has to pay for it himself." The blunt assessment made me wince, but I appreciated his honesty. "And how about you? Are you mad at me too?" "Nah," he said casually. "I mean, it sucks about the college fund, but I still have 4 years before I need it. And Dad makes pretty good money, so it's not like we're poor or anything." The simple logic of his 14-year-old perspective was refreshing. "That's true," I agreed. "And I've said all along that I still want to help with your education. It's just going to be different now." "Yeah, that's what I told Dad. But he gets all weird when I mention you, so I've stopped trying." A pang of sadness hit me. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle, Tyler. That was never my intention." "It's okay. Dad'll get over it eventually. He's just used to getting his way, you know?" Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. Yes, I do know. But sometimes people need to learn they can't always get their way, even adults. "Exactly." His voice brightened again. "Hey, so are you still thinking I could come visit you somewhere this summer? Because I've been researching all these cool places along your route." "Absolutely," I assured him. "We'll work something out." After we hung up, I sat on my cottage porch, listening to the night sounds of Key West, distant music from Duval Street, the rustle of palm fronds, the occasional rooster apparently confused about what time of day it was. I felt both heartened and saddened by my conversation with Tyler. Heartened because his unconditional love hadn't wavered, because he saw through the adult drama to what mattered. Saddened because the rift with Natalie and Rick was affecting him despite my best intentions. The next day, I received an email from Zoe, the first direct communication since I'd left. "Grandma, I got your package. The bracelet is beautiful. Thank you. Mom says I shouldn't accept gifts from you right now, but that seems stupid. You're still my grandmother, even if you're being weird about money. I got waitlisted at Brown. Dad says we can't afford it anymore anyway, so I'll probably end up at Oregon State. It's fine, I guess. Not what I planned, but whatever. Are you coming home soon? Zoe." My heart ached at the flat tone, the barely concealed resentment. I'd known my actions would have consequences, but seeing it spelled out so starkly in my granddaughter's email made it real in a new way. I crafted my response carefully. Dearest Zoe, I'm so glad you like the bracelet. The artist who made it told me the silver pattern represents paths crossing and reconnecting, a reminder that even when we're separated by distance or disagreement, the bonds of family remain. I'm sorry to hear about Brown. I know how much you wanted to go there, but please know that my offer to help with your education still stands. It may not be in the form of the fund your parents were counting on, but I want to support your dreams. We can talk about what that might look like when things are calmer between all of us. As for coming home, I will eventually, of course. But this journey is important to me. It's something your grandfather and I always planned to do together. And completing it feels like honoring him as well as finally doing something just for me. I love you, Zoe. That hasn't changed and won't change, no matter what else is happening in our family right now. All my love, Grandma. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response was honest but gentle, maintaining my boundaries, while reassuring her of my love. It was the best I could do from a distance. 2 weeks into my Key West stay, I received an unexpected call from Rick. Seeing his name on my caller ID made my stomach clench, but I answered, determined to be civil. Eleanor, he said, his tone formal. I hope you're well. I am, thanks. You? I replied, matching his formality. How are you and the family? We're managing. He cleared his throat. I'm calling about Zoe's college situation. She's been waitlisted at Brown but accepted at several state schools. The financial calculations have changed significantly without the fund we were counting on. I noted he couldn't quite bring himself to acknowledge that I had been the one providing the money. Yes, I understand that. Zoe mentioned it in an email. Right. Well, another throat clearing. I wanted to ask if you're still planning to help with her education in some capacity, as you've mentioned to both Natalie and the children. I am, I said simply. I've never intended to abandon my grandchildren, Rick. I just need the terms of my support to be different. Different how, exactly? His tone was cautious, as if afraid of triggering another rebellion on my part. I'd like to pay semester by semester directly to the school, and I'd like Zoe to maintain certain academic standards to continue receiving my support. That seems reasonable, he said, sounding surprised. I thought so. I couldn't resist adding, I'm not the unreasonable burden you might have assumed. There was a long pause. Then, to my shock, Rick said quietly, I owe you an apology for that comment. It was uncalled for, regardless of how frustrated I was feeling. The admission stunned me. In all the years I'd known Rick, I'd never heard him apologize so directly. Thank you, I said simply. I appreciate that. To be clear, he continued in a more businesslike tone, are you offering to pay Zoe's full tuition, room and board at whichever school she chooses? Not quite, I said carefully. I'm offering to pay tuition and books. Room and board will be your responsibility, or Zoe can apply for additional scholarships or work-study programs. I could almost hear the calculations running in his head. That's generous, he said finally. Thank you. You're welcome. And Rick? I'd appreciate if we could keep this arrangement between us, Natalie, and Zoe for now. I'll make similar arrangements for Tyler when the time comes, but I'd like to discuss that with him directly. Of course. After we hung up, I felt oddly light. Rick's call hadn't fixed everything. There was still tension, still hurt feelings on both sides. But it was a step. A recognition that we needed to find a new way forward, for the grandchildren's sake, if nothing else. That night, I joined Harold and Kelly for dinner at the Hungry Pelican. They'd become something like friends during my stay, offering local insights and genuine conversation that had nothing to do with my family drama. As we shared a key lime pie for dessert, Kelly asked, So where's the next stop on your grand adventure, Ellie? Sedona, I said. Red rocks, spiritual vortexes, all that desert magic. Quite a contrast to Key West, Harold commented. That's the idea. I want to experience all the places James and I dreamed about but never saw. The diversity of it. The unexpected connections. Like finding friends in a beach town? Kelly suggested with a smile. Exactly like that, I agreed, touched by the sentiment. I never expected to feel so at home here among strangers. Not strangers anymore, Harold corrected gently. Just new friends. Later, walking back to my cottage under the tropical night, sky, I reflected on his words. Not strangers anymore. It was true. In just a few weeks, I'd formed connections here that felt genuine and nurturing. I'd been seen and appreciated for who I was, not what I could provide. It made me wonder, had I been complicit in my invisibility back home? Had I allowed myself to become merely a function, financial provider, childcare backup, emotional support, rather than insisting on being seen as a complete person with my own needs and desires? The question didn't have an easy answer, but asking it felt important. Part of my transformation wasn't just standing up to others' expectations, but examining my own patterns, my own willingness to disappear into roles rather than assert my full personhood. As I packed my bags for the next leg of my journey, I felt a twinge of sadness at leaving Key West. The island had given me more than just sunshine and beautiful sunsets. It had shown me I could build new connections, could be valued for exactly who I was rather than what I could provide. It had helped me understand that the problem wasn't just how others saw me, it was how I saw myself. The morning of my departure, I found Harold waiting at my cottage, offering to drive me to the small airport. You didn't have to do that, I protested. I could have called a taxi. Nonsense, he said, taking my suitcase. Friends don't let. Friends overpay for airport transportation. As we drove, he asked, "So has this trip been what you hoped so far? Finding what you're looking for?" I considered the question seriously. I think I'm finding things I didn't even know I was looking for, I said finally. A sense of myself outside of my family roles, permission to prioritize my own joy, the knowledge that I can connect with new people on my own terms. He nodded, approvingly. Sounds like success to me. At the airport, he handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. A little something to remember Key West by, he said. Don't open it until you're on the plane. I hugged him goodbye, promising to stay in touch and to let him know when I reached Sedona safely. It wasn't until I was settled in my seat, waiting for takeoff, that I unwrapped his gift. A small watercolor painting of a sunset over the ocean, with a silhouette of a woman standing at the edge of the water, arms outstretched. On the back, he'd written, "To Ellie, who came to find joy and reminded an old fisherman how to see the world through fresh eyes. Fair winds and following seas. Harold." As the plane lifted off, carrying me toward the next chapter of my journey, I held the painting close and smiled through tears. This journey wasn't just about reclaiming the trip James and I had planned. It was about rediscovering myself, piece by piece, in places I'd never been before. And the woman I was finding, strong, worthy of respect, capable of joy, was someone I was growing to like very much indeed. Sedona welcomed me with a sunset that seemed to set the red rocks on fire. After the humid embrace of Key West, the desert air felt clarifying, each breath sharper, cleaner, as if the very atmosphere was designed to bring clarity. My rental was a small adobe casita on the outskirts of town, with a patio that faced Bell Rock and a hot tub beneath a canopy of stars so vast and bright it made me feel both insignificant and infinite at once. The transition wasn't as jarring as I'd expected. There was something about the vastness of the landscape that felt like a natural progression from the endless horizon of the ocean. Both places invited contemplation, demanded presence. Neither allowed for the distraction of mundane worries or the comfortable numbing of routine. I'd been traveling for nearly 2 months now. Portland and its dramas felt increasingly distant, like a story I'd read rather than lived. The daily calls and texts from Natalie had dwindled to weekly check-ins, less frantic, more measured. Rick's tone during our occasional interactions about Zoe's college plans had shifted from entitled to cautiously respectful. Small changes, but significant ones. My first morning in Sedona, I woke before dawn and sat on my patio watching the stars fade as the sky lightened. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional call of a coyote or the soft rustling of wind through juniper trees. I felt an unexpected sense of belonging in this alien landscape, as if the stark beauty of the place recognized something equally stark and beautiful in me that had been emerging throughout my journey. I'd arranged for a guided hike that morning, wanting to explore the famous red rock formations with someone who could explain their geological and spiritual significance. My guide, a wiry woman in her 60s named Judith, arrived precisely at 7, dressed in hiking boots and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed keen eyes. "First time in Sedona?" she asked as we set out toward Cathedral Rock. "Yes," I replied. "It's been on my bucket list for decades." "What made you finally take the plunge?" I hesitated, then gave her the simplified version. "My husband passed away several years ago. We had all these plans for travel that never happened. I recently decided it was time to fulfill them, even if I have to do it alone." Judith nodded approvingly. "Good for you. Too many people wait for the right time that never comes, or they wait for someone to do it with them." "That was me," I admitted, always putting everyone else's needs first. "And now?" "Now I'm learning to put myself on the list too." She smiled, a flash of understanding passing between us. "That's what Sedona does best. Helps people remember their own worth." The hike was challenging but exhilarating. Judith pointed out various rock formations, explaining both their geological origins and the spiritual significance attributed to them by various traditions. She showed me spots where the energy was said to form a vortex, places where the juniper trees grew in twisted spirals, supposedly shaped by the powerful energy currents. "Do you believe in the vortexes?" I asked as we paused to drink water in the shade of a massive red rock formation. "I believe in places that make people pause and pay attention," she said thoughtfully. "Whether it's the actual energy of the earth or just the impact of this stunning landscape forcing people to be present, does it matter if the effect is the same?" Her words resonated with me. So much of my journey had been about learning to be present in my own life, in my own skin, about recognizing my own worth independent of what I could provide to others. "You're seeking something," Judith observed after we'd hiked in companionable silence for a while. It wasn't a question. "Isn't everyone?" I deflected, suddenly feeling exposed. She laughed, the sound echoing off the red rocks around us. "Sure, but most people come to Sedona looking for external magic. Vortexes, energy fields, spiritual experiences they can post about on social media. You're looking inward." "Is it that obvious?" "To me, yes. I've been guiding these trails for 20 years. I can spot the difference between tourists and pilgrims." "I'm not sure I'd call myself a pilgrim," I protested. "No?" She stopped, turning to face me fully. "What would you call someone who leaves behind the familiar to journey through challenging terrain, seeking truth and transformation?" I had no answer to that. "The desert has a way of stripping away pretense," Judith continued as we resumed our hike. "Everything here is exposed to the elements. Nothing can hide. It's the perfect place to shed old skins, old stories about who you are and what you're worth." By the time we returned to the trailhead, my legs were aching, but my mind felt clearer than it had in months. Judith had spoken little during the latter part of our hike, allowing me space to absorb the landscape and my own thoughts. As we parted, she handed me a small red stone, smoothed by water and time. "A reminder," she said simply, "of what you've discovered here." Back at my casita, I showered away the dust and sweat of the trail, then settled on my patio with a glass of iced tea. The afternoon heat was intense but dry, nothing like the humid swelter of Key West. I found I didn't mind it. There was something purifying about the way it seemed to bake away extraneous concerns, leaving only what mattered most. I picked up my phone and, on impulse, called Natalie. Our conversations had been stilted since my departure, but this time she answered with a warmth I hadn't heard in months. "Mom, I was just thinking about you. How's Sedona?" "Breathtaking," I said, surprised by her enthusiasm. "I hiked Cathedral Rock this morning." "You? Hiking?" There was genuine amazement in her voice. "I don't think I've seen you exercise since Dad died." The observation caught me off guard. She was right. I'd let so many aspects of my life slide, focusing solely on being available to her and the children. "I'm discovering I'm capable of more than I thought," I said carefully. There was a pause. Then Natalie said, "I've been doing some thinking, Mom, about everything that happened before you left, about what you said regarding how we've been treating you." I held my breath, not wanting to interrupt what felt like an important moment. "I talked to a therapist," she continued. "Rick thought it was unnecessary, but after you left, I just kept replaying all our interactions, trying to understand what went wrong. And the therapist helped me see some patterns, ways that I, have been taking you for granted." "Natalie," I began, emotion welling up, but she cut me off. "Please let me finish. This isn't easy for me." She took a deep breath. "You were right. We stopped seeing you as a person with your own needs and dreams. We treated you like a resource, a safety net. I'm not proud of it, but I need to acknowledge it." I sat down on the edge of my patio chair, stunned by her words. After months of defending herself, of minimizing my feelings, Natalie was finally hearing me. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than you know." "I want to do better," she continued. "I want us to have a relationship that's not based on what you can give us, but on mutual respect. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I'm willing to figure it out, if you are." "I am," I assured her. "That's all I've wanted." We talked for nearly an hour, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. About my travels, about the kids, about her work, about Rick's continued struggle to accept the new financial boundaries, though she admitted he was slowly coming around. "He's not a bad person," she said defensively. "He just grew up with different values around money and family obligations." "I know he's not," I assured her. "And I'm not asking him to change his values just to respect mine." When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because everything was magically fixed. It wasn't, and wouldn't be for some time. But because for the first time, we were having an honest conversation about the real issues, not just the surface symptoms. That evening, I attended a sound healing session at the recommendation of my hiking guide. In a dome-shaped structure with perfect acoustics, a practitioner played crystal bowls that resonated at different frequencies, said to correspond with various energy centers in the body. I lay on a mat, eyes closed, letting the sounds wash over me. As the tones vibrated through me, I found my thoughts drifting to the future. What would my life look like when this journey ended? Would I return to Portland, to my familiar home and routines? Or was there something else waiting for me? Some new chapter I couldn't yet envision? For the first time, the question didn't fill me with anxiety. Whatever came next, I would face it as this new version of myself. The woman who had driven across the country alone, who had stood firm in the face of manipulation, who had rediscovered her own worth beyond the roles she played for others. The next morning, I received an email from Zoe that nearly brought me to tears. "Grandma, I got accepted off the wait list at Brown, and I got a partial scholarship too. Dad says with your help for tuition, they can manage the rest. I can't believe." It's actually happening. I know things have been weird between you and Mom and Dad. I didn't understand at first why you canceled the college fund. I was just scared about not getting to go to my dream school. But Mom explained some things to me about how they've been treating you, and I think I get it better now. Thank you for still wanting to help me even when things got messed up. Mom says you're teaching us all something important about respect and boundaries. I'm trying to listen. Miss you. When are you coming home? Love, Zoe. I read the email 3 times, my heart full. The old me would have immediately started planning my return, feeling the pull of obligation now that I was needed again. But the woman I'd become recognized this for what it was. Not a summons, but a genuine reconnection. I could respond with love without abandoning my journey. My reply was honest and open. Dearest Zoe, I'm thrilled about Brown. Your hard work has paid off, and I'm so proud of you. Yes, I will absolutely help with tuition as I promised. You deserve this opportunity, and I'm happy to support your dreams. Thank you for your understanding about the changes I've made. It means more than you know. This journey has been necessary for me, a way to rediscover who I am beyond being just a mother and grandmother, though I cherish those roles deeply. As for coming home, I still have a few more stops on my adventure. Charleston next, then Quebec City as my final destination. I should be back in Portland by early summer. Perhaps we can plan a special dinner to celebrate your acceptance to Brown. All my love, Grandma. I spent the next few days exploring Sedona's spiritual side. I'd never been particularly drawn to New Age philosophies, but there was something about this place that invited openness to new experiences. I had a tarot reading in a tiny shop filled with crystals and incense, took a class on meditation at a local yoga studio, and even tried my hand at creating a small mandala from colored sand. None of these activities would have appealed to me 2 months ago. The Eleanor Jenkins who had left Portland would have dismissed them as frivolous, possibly even foolish. But the woman I was becoming understood the value of play, of exploration beyond the practical, of experiences that nourished the spirit rather than just fulfilling obligations. Perhaps that was the most significant transformation of all. Learning to value experiences for their own sake rather than for what they produced or achieved. Learning to claim joy as a birthright rather than a luxury I hadn't earned. 3 days later, I received a text from Tyler with a photo attached. The picture showed him standing proudly next to a science fair display about desert astronomy, clearly inspired by our conversations about my travels. His text read, "First place. Thanks for helping me with the research, Grandma. Dad even said the project was impressive, which is practically a standing ovation from him." I smiled at his excitement, pleased that our connection had remained so strong despite the distance and family tensions. My reply was immediate and enthusiastic, asking for details about his project and what he'd learned. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Rick. My relationship with my son-in-law had been strained even before the Christmas dinner incident, but the confrontation and my subsequent actions had turned that strain into outright tension. Seeing his name on my caller ID made my stomach clench, but I answered, determined to be civil. "Eleanor," he greeted me, his tone formal but lacking the barely suppressed anger I'd grown accustomed to. "Rick," I replied neutrally. "How are you?" "I'm managing." There was a pause, then he continued. "I imagine Natalie or Zoe has already told you the news about Brown?" "Yes, I heard from Zoe this morning. I'm thrilled for her." "We all are." Another pause. "Look, Eleanor, I'll get to the point. I owe you an apology." The words were so unexpected I nearly dropped the phone. In all the years I'd known Rick, I'd never heard him admit he was wrong about anything substantial. I was out of line at Christmas. He continued when I didn't immediately respond. "What I said about you being a burden, it was unconscionable, and not just that night. I've been doing some reflecting, and I realize I've been treating you more like a family asset than a person. I'm not proud of it. I sank into my patio chair, genuinely stunned. Thank you, Rick. That means a lot. I can't say I fully understand all the changes you're making, he admitted. The trip, the financial restructuring. It's not how I was raised to think about family obligations, but I'm trying to respect that you have the right to make those choices. That's all I've asked for, I said softly. Not for you to agree with my choices, but to respect my right to make them. I'm working on it, he said, and I believed him. The admission cost him something. I could hear it in the tightness of his voice, but he was making the effort. Natalie and I have been talking a lot about how we move forward as a family, how we rebuild trust. I appreciate that, I said. It means more than you know. After we hung up, I sat on my patio for a long time, watching the light change on the red rocks as afternoon faded toward evening. Rick's call had shaken me, not unpleasantly, but profoundly. It was one thing for Natalie to acknowledge the problems in our relationship. She was my daughter, and despite our recent conflicts, there had always been love between us. But Rick's recognition of his role in the dysfunction, his willingness to apologize, that was unexpected. Perhaps I had underestimated both of them. Perhaps they were capable of more growth, more self-reflection than I'd given them credit for. The thought both humbled and heartened me. That evening, I joined a small group for a sunset meditation at Airport Mesa, one of the famous vortex sites. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the landscape in brilliant oranges and purples, the guide invited us to set an intention for our lives moving forward. Eyes closed, feeling the last warmth of the sun on my face, I made my intention, clear and strong, to live authentically, to love generously but wisely, to value myself as much as I valued others, to never again allow myself to become invisible in my own life. The meditation ended with a simple ceremony, each participant lighting a small candle from a central flame, symbolizing the light we carried within us. As I held my candle, watching, its flame steady and bright despite the desert breeze, I felt a profound sense of peace. The anger that had propelled me from Portland had transformed into something more sustainable, not a burning resentment, but a steady resolve to live differently. To love my family without losing myself in the process. My time in Sedona extended into a third week, as I found myself reluctant to leave the clarity I'd found there. I explored hidden canyons, photographed ancient petroglyphs, and spent hours in conversation with new friends who knew nothing of my past, but seemed eager to know the person I was becoming. It was during this extended stay that I received a package from Portland, a small box addressed in Natalie's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in shades of red and orange reminiscent of Sedona's landscape, along with a card. "Mom," she'd written, "I found this yarn and thought of your descriptions of the red rocks. I haven't knitted since high school, so please forgive the uneven stitches. Consider it a peace offering and a promise to see you, really see you when you return. With love, Natalie." I ran my fingers over the scarf, noticing the places where the tension had been too tight or too loose, seeing in them Natalie's determination to complete something she hadn't attempted in decades. It wasn't just a gift. It was a message. She was willing to try new things, to be uncomfortable, to make an effort, just as I had been doing throughout this journey. That night, I wrapped the scarf around my shoulders as I sat on my patio, gazing up at stars so brilliant they seemed to pulse with life. The desert night was cool, but I felt warmed by more than wool, by connection, by hope, by the knowledge that relationships, like people, could transform if given enough space and honesty. When I finally left Sedona for Charleston, I carried with me not just souvenirs and photographs, but a deeper understanding of what I was seeking. Not escape from my family, but a healthier way to be part of it. Not abandonment of my responsibilities, but a balanced approach that honored my needs alongside others. Not punishment for past hurts, but boundaries that prevented future ones. Charleston greeted me with a different kind of beauty. Historic architecture, cobblestone streets, gardens dripping with azaleas and wisteria. After the stark grandeur of the desert, the city's genteel charm was a delightful contrast. I stayed in a small bed and breakfast in the historic district, my room overlooking a courtyard where a fountain played day and night. The innkeeper, a woman named Margaret with silver hair and a melodious South Carolina drawl, took a motherly interest in my solo travels. "Most women your age come with friends or husbands," she observed as she served me breakfast on my first morning. "But you strike me as someone who knows her own mind." "I'm learning to," I admitted. "Well, honey, better late than never," she said with a wink. "Some folks go their whole lives without figuring out who they are, apart from who they're supposed to be." Her words stayed with me as I explored the city, its historic homes, its markets, its waterfront parks. Who was I apart from who I was supposed to be? Mother, grandmother, widow. These roles had defined me for so long that I'd forgotten there was more to me than the functions I performed for others. But this journey was reminding me. The woman who hiked red rock trails, who went deep-sea fishing, who meditated at sunset vortexes, she was also Eleanor Jenkins, had always been beneath the layers of obligation and expectation I'd wrapped around myself like a protective cocoon. During my stay in Charleston, I found myself drawing connections between the city's history and my own journey. Charleston had survived wars, earthquakes, hurricanes, had been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Yet, rather than erasing its past, each reconstruction had incorporated elements of what came before, creating a rich tapestry of old and new, tradition and innovation. Perhaps that was the key to my own rebuilding. Not rejecting my roles as mother and grandmother, but incorporating them into a more complete identity that allowed room for Eleanor the traveler, Eleanor the adventurer, Eleanor the woman with her own dreams and needs. I spent mornings exploring the city and afternoons writing in my journal, documenting not just the external journey, but the internal one. In the evenings, I often dined alone at small restaurants, something that would have mortified me months ago but now felt like a small, pleasant luxury, choosing my own pace, my own preferences, without negotiating or compromising. It was in Charleston that I began to envision my return to Portland, not as an ending to my journey of self-discovery, but as the beginning of a new chapter where I could integrate what I'd learned into my daily life. I wouldn't stop being a mother or grandmother. Those connections were precious to me. But I would be those things differently, from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. As my departure for the final leg of my journey approached, I found myself both eager for the new experiences awaiting me in Quebec City and thoughtful about the eventual return home. Would I be able to maintain the boundaries I'd established? Would the changes in my family's attitudes prove lasting, or would old patterns reassert themselves once we were face to face? On my last evening in Charleston, I received a call from Tyler. "Grandma, guess what? Dad agreed I can come visit you this summer. He even helped me research flights to Quebec City if you're still going to be there in June." The news caught me by surprise. Rick facilitating a visit rather than obstructing, it represented a significant shift. "That's wonderful, Tyler. I'd love to have you join me." "I know, right? Mom says it's a sign he's finally accepting the new normal. Whatever that means. I just think it's cool I get to see Quebec. Is it true everyone speaks French there?" "Mostly, yes," I laughed. "We'll have to learn a few phrases before you come." After we hung up, I sat in the courtyard of my inn, listening to the fountain and thinking about Rick's concession. It wasn't a complete transformation. He was still Rick, after all, with his fixed ideas about family obligations and financial priorities. But it was movement, an acknowledgement that things had changed, that I had changed, and that fighting that change was futile. The following day, as my train carried me north toward my final destination, I found myself filled with a quiet anticipation. Quebec City represented the culmination of my physical journey, but it was also a beginning, the first place I would visit with the full knowledge that I was no longer running from something, but moving toward a future of my own choosing. The landscape outside my window transformed gradually from the lush greenery of the south to the more austere beauty of the north. Forests thickened, towns grew fewer and farther between, and eventually, small patches of late spring snow appeared, in shaded areas. I thought about the parallel journey within me, from the overwrought emotions that had propelled me from Portland to this quieter, steadier sense of purpose. From reaction to intention. From wounded flight to deliberate exploration. Quebec City welcomed me with a blend of European charm and North American practicality. The old town, with its cobblestone streets and stone buildings, reminded me of pictures I'd seen of French villages. Yet there was an energy to the place that felt distinctly New World, a pioneering spirit underlying the historic facades. My hotel was a converted monastery near the Château Frontenac, its thick stone walls and small, deep-set windows speaking to its origins. My room was simple but comfortable, with a view of the St. Lawrence River that took my breath away. On my first morning, I woke early and walked the old city walls as dawn broke over the river. The air was crisp, the streets still quiet except for delivery trucks and early workers. I felt a sense of completion and beginning intertwined, the circle of my journey closing even as new possibilities opened before me. Later that day, I called Natalie to share my first impressions of Quebec and was delighted when she responded with genuine interest rather than the passive acknowledgement I'd grown accustomed to. We talked about the city's history, about the differences between Canadian and American culture, about the challenges of navigating in a primarily French-speaking environment. "It sounds amazing, Mom," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm glad you're having these experiences. You deserve them." Those simple words, "you deserve them," might have seemed small to someone else. But to me, they represented a profound shift in Natalie's thinking. From seeing my journey as selfish indulgence to recognizing it as something earned through years of putting others first. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than you know." As the days passed, I settled into a rhythm in Quebec City. Mornings for exploration, afternoons for reflection, evenings for embracing local culture. Whether attending a small concert, trying a new restaurant, or simply sitting in a cafe watching the world go by. I found myself picking up French phrases, making connections with shopkeepers and waiters who appreciated my efforts even when I mangled their language. I discovered a small bookstore with an English section where the owner, learning of my journey, recommended travel memoirs that spoke to my experience. It was there, browsing among shelves of well-loved books, that I came across a volume that stopped me in my tracks. The Second Journey, The Road Back to Yourself. The title alone seemed to speak directly to my experience. I bought it and spent, that afternoon, reading on a bench overlooking the river. The author wrote of midlife not as a crisis, but as an invitation. A chance to reclaim aspects of oneself that had been set aside for practical concerns, like career and family. She described the journey back to authenticity as equally important as the original journey toward adulthood and responsibility. Her words articulated what I had been feeling but couldn't quite name. This trip wasn't an escape or a rejection of my former life. It was a completion of it, adding the missing pieces that made me whole. That evening, I wrote long emails to both Zoe and Tyler, sharing not just the sights and sounds of Quebec, but the insights I'd gained. I wanted them to understand that this journey wasn't about abandoning them, but about becoming a more authentic version of myself. Someone who could love them more wholly because I wasn't depleted by resentment and unmet needs. The responses I received in the following days suggested they were beginning to understand. Zoe wrote of her own emerging independence, her excitement about college tempered by anxiety about leaving home. Tyler shared his frustrations with middle school social dynamics and his hopes for the summer visit with me. Both ended their messages with "Love you, Grandma," simple words that meant everything. As May turned to June, I began planning for Tyler's visit, while also considering my eventual return to Portland. The woman who had fled after Christmas dinner was gone, replaced by someone stronger, clearer about her boundaries, more confident in her worth beyond what she could provide to others. I would return, but not to the same life I had left, not to the same relationships or expectations. I would return as this new Eleanor, the one who had hiked red rocks and sailed turquoise waters, who had meditated at energy vortexes and walked ancient city walls, the one who had reclaimed her right to joy, to autonomy, to respect. On a bright June morning, I stood at the arrivals gate of Quebec City's airport, watching for Tyler's lanky form among the deplaning passengers. When he spotted me, his face lit up with a smile so genuine it brought tears to my eyes. He rushed toward me, dropping his backpack to throw his arms around me in a hug that nearly knocked me off my feet. "Grandma, this place is so cool. Did you see the giant plane they have on display in the terminal? And everyone was speaking French on the connecting flight from Montreal, just like you said." His enthusiasm was contagious, his presence a tangible reminder of why family connections mattered so deeply to me. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine love and the joy of witnessing new generations discover the world. As we drove back to my hotel, Tyler chattering about his flight and all the things he wanted to see, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what healthy family relationships could be: mutual joy in each other's company, shared experiences, respect for each other's boundaries and needs. The journey that had begun with hurt and anger at a Christmas dinner table had brought me to this moment of clarity and peace. I had smiled and canceled their college fund, yes. But more importantly, I had found the courage to reclaim my life, to demand respect, to value myself as much as I valued others. The road ahead was long, with challenges and adjustments still to come. Returning to Portland would test my resolve and my family's commitment to change. Old patterns would try to reassert themselves. Boundaries would need to be maintained. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of those challenges. I would face them as this new Eleanor, strong, worthy, visible. No longer a burden to be tolerated or a resource to be drained, but a woman of value in her own right. As Tyler and I walked the streets of Quebec City that afternoon, his wonder at the historic buildings and foreign language a delight to witness, I felt the final pieces of my transformation settling into place. I wasn't just existing anymore. I was truly living, and that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.